Hello, this is Panda Consulting's ArcGIS workshop. I'm Frank Conkling, and we're doing something a little different this time. Um, Last workshop we had was about mapping and maintaining subdivisions in the parcel fabric. And during that, we went into some depth. And again, we don't produce sort of the traditional YouTube videos because ours are always fairly long formats, an hour. But even at then, sometimes we can't get into the depth that some of our people who are attending like to get into. So after the recording last time, we turned off all the recordings and opened up the webcams, and we had a lot of really good questions on here. So what we're going to do this time is we're going to take those questions and we're going to dig deeper. We're going to look at some of the questions that are on here. And really, we appreciate those of you who are attending live. And by the way, just as a reminder, this is the benefit of attending live is that you can put up questions during the workshop in the chat windows. And afterwards, it's an open forum. You can ask any questions you want. So definitely go and do that. In the meantime, just sort of to remind everyone, on the lower right corner is a QR code, gets you to Panda Consulting's website. You can find out who we are, what we do, why we do it, and how we do it. Again, a reminder, we are an ESRI business partner, have been for 26 or so years. We are the first business partner in the nation to go and get the parcel management specialty designation. Together with, we have the state and local and release ready and such. So let's dig into this. Let's see what some of the things we're going to talk about this time are. And these are some of the questions we had. One was consolidating multiple points without losing data. There's several tools that we have that help us to go and take excessive points and small lines and consolidate them together. So what's the best way to do it? I think is really the question here. And then another thing we're going to talk about is reversing line directions and then using azimuths instead of quadrant bearings. And what do we have to consider with doing that? And then it was just some general questions afterwards about this whole concept of building from small to large or large to small. Do you build the whole thing and then divide it up? Or do you build the small things and then merge them or aggregate them together into a larger element in there? And again, this was specifically for subdivisions, but I'll give you my opinion on what and how you should do that. Then we're going to talk a little bit more about techniques for ground to grid. Why would you want to use ground to grid? And what does ground to grid literally do on here? Um, and then finally, the differences between aligned features and aligned parcels. They're two tools. Aligned features is actually one of the components of aligned parcels. And when would you use one versus the other? We'll see if we have enough time to talk about that. So let's dig into this. So the first thing we want to do is, well, let's actually, we were talking about the consolidate lines in here. And we have here a sample of some parcel data. And by the way, thank you for sending it to us. And in this parcel fabric, we've got a couple of underlying components. We've got tax parcels here. We've got some conveyance division elements in here. And this is using ESRI standard symbology. But just sort of to show you, if I turn off the conveyance division, you see these parcels being a little bit lighter and such. And if I turn off the SimCon, you can see where this is within a simultaneous conveyance, but this is not. That doesn't matter for what we want to talk about. So we want to talk about this up here, this element here, and that a couple things happen with ArcMap, especially if we're using topology. It would go and insert vertices within our lines. Often these lines were split as a result. For example, possibly there was an easement there or some sort of encumbrance placed upon there. And so that when you do the migration, sometimes you wind up with this situation in which you have small lines in there, but they really should be consolidated. And there's a couple of tools that are available to you in the parcel fabric to go and help you with this. Most of them being quality driven tools. There are some that we do not want to use, and some that there's possibilities that we can use them, but there's consequences. And that's always the thing you want to look for. When you're looking at the tool, you want to understand not just what it's supposed to be used for, but what the unseen consequences are. So let's start with this. Here's one you never use in this situation. This is, in fact, where we have 2 points here. All right, we had 2 points, and there's actually a line in between here. And the tool that you do not want to use on this situation is the merge points tool. What's the merge points tool do? The merge points tool, and again, this is a parcel fabric only tool. The merge points tool will allow you to go and select multiple points and then takes those 2 points and shows you and gives you a preview of what it's going to look like if you merge these points together. All right. So in this case, if it were to go and merge to one, the the lot line, the parcel line would all go and move down to that other point. If I say merge it to two, it will do that. And that seems logical, but down here we need to look because here it says allow the removal of lines and polygons between these merge points. This is the default setting. With this setting checked, what will happen is that this this point will move to here and watch what happens to the 12. Look at this is 107.90. Watch what happens to the 12 in here. It will go and merge them together. 107.92. It completely removes that point in there and it just disappears. Merge the points together. That's great. That's exactly what you want. So you have a cleaner line. The problem is there was no updating of the COGO values in here, so you basically lost those 12 points along that line. That is not what I think you want to do in this case. I think you really want to go and make sure that you maintain that value, or optimally, you aggregate these together on here so that you have a new value in here. So no merge points tool. That's not going to work. But what happens if we were to go and do that? And let's just play out again. We're going to do this in depth. But instead of this, we're going to uncheck that. Okay. In this case, it actually gives us a warning. It says it's going to collapse a line point, and it will not let us go and do this because there's something in there. All right. So for those people that were going to ask that question, you cannot do it if, in fact, it's going to collapse it. It actually is preventing you from doing that. So again, this is not the tool to use on here. So then what are the other tools that you can possibly do? There is, in fact, a tool. Let's go ahead and select some lines in here. Let's take these 2 lines. Let's go over to our attributes, and let's just select these. Only select the tax lines. I don't care about the conveyance division lines or others, but only select those. There's also a tool on the quality-driven work quality tab called Merge Collinear Lines. Now, this is a geoprocessing tool, but since we have a selection in here, it will go and work on that, and we'll tell it to go and work on the lines that we have selected that are in there, and it tells us that we have 4 lines in there. Now, again, watch when we do this. So we go ahead and apply this, and it runs that geoprocessing element in here and merges them together. All right. And in this case, it has gone. And by the way, I'm running ArcGIS Pro 3.5. So there are some changes in earlier versions of this. Let's turn off these others so that we don't get confused. We selected the tax parcel lines here, and it merged those tax parcel lines and took the COGO value that was on there and aggregated them together and then marked it as being computed. Again, remember on in COGO, when we have, excuse me, in the parcel fabric, when we have COGO lines in here, the actual label is dependent upon what the COGO type field is set to. COGO type field is set to either entered from geometry or computed. Entered means that the actual mapper went and input that value and it reflects what the official document says. From geometry says it was calculated using the update Kogo values tool. And so it came from the geometry, came from the shape line, and then compute it basically says that there was values that were on there and it's gone and changed them. They're a result of some sort of function, either a split or a divide or this aggregation where you've gone and merged these collinear tools in here, those collinear lines in here. I can tell you previous versions of ArcGIS Pro did not correctly aggregate those values. All right. So they did not directly come in there. So the question we have, and this is a great question. Well, wait a minute. If I take 12 and I take 108, that doesn't add up to 240, which is what that value is there. Instead, that should be 120 plus or minus. Where did this come from? Well, it came from the fact that it took 4 lines and it went and aggregated and merged all 4 of those lines together. All right. In this case, it went and merged them all to one single line. Again, remember I had selected in here. Let's wait for this to go and do this. I had selected these. One more time. So select this, select these lines in here, and I selected these 4 and only 4 in here. All right, so it did those 4 lines, but it calculated and added all of them together. So kind of getting the right place, but because we have lines on top of lines, and by the way, these lines on top of lines, they're a result of having one set of lines for this parcel to the left and another set of lines for the parcel that's on the right. It's because of the way that each of those parcels had its own separate lines. If they were shared lines, it would not do that. But because they have separate lines in there, it's going and aggregating them together on here. So because of that, we're going and doing the merge, doing the 4. There's nothing in here that says go and take them and set them up. The other thing we have to watch out for is that when we did the aggregation on here, all right, when we did and merge the collinear lines, because this is in the parcel fabric, what did it do to I'm looking for it here. What did it do to our created by record? Was there a new one? Because I do not have an active record here. So I suspect it took one of the created by record values and made all of them the same. This one is kind of tricky. So I just want to be aware. So the 240 actually came from the aggregation of those 4 lines, the COGO values on all 4 of those lines, not just 2 like it should have been. So if you have lines on top of lines, if you have separate lines on top of one another, you do not want to use this merge collinear lines either. This is not going to get you in the parcel fabric really what you want to do on here. All right, again, if I look at this and I take these 2 lines, there's 4 lines. If we add these 4 values up, it should be right around 240 on here. That's how it aggregated and came together for that 240 plus or minus. That's not the solution either for here. But there is a tool. There is a tool that we can use. Now, I wish I could say that this was universal or that especially if you have a whole lot of these together, whether it's something that you can batch on here, there's not. But the tool that we have in the parcel fabric is one here. If let's go over to our tools, it's actually called Reconstruct Boundaries. Reconstruct Boundaries is really unique because what it does is logically it goes through for all the parcels that you have selected. It goes back to the record, looks at the record, says, okay, now let me look and analyze the lines associated with this record. And then let me go and aggregate those lines that are associated with this record. And then I'll go and merge those together. So if we do this here on this one, it doesn't necessarily, you don't select the lines, you select the parcels. And then the parcel goes back to the record. Then the record goes and selects the lines that are on here. So let's do a reconstruct boundary here and see what the results are. So now we have the 120.6, which is the aggregation of the 107 and 12, and we have the 120.09 here. So it's gone and done it correctly, and it only did it for the lines that were associated with that parcel. Again, the association goes the parcel polygon to the record to the lines. So in this case, because we have a parcel fabric and we have parcel fabric data, we have the ability to go and selectively say, these are the parcels that we wish to go and correct. And again, I can select the parcels and then I can say reconstruct the boundaries here, and it will go and reconstruct all of those boundaries for me on here. Now, why did it not do this one? This was one that was interesting to me because it didn't necessarily do this when I was doing it. And I'm not sure why it didn't do this, whether there was a different bearing on here or not. But the way it's supposed to work is, well, let's go in and get rid of all those other previous changes in here and undo all of them. Let's go in here and do this again. Let's go ahead and test it. And now it disappeared. So I had done something in the interim that was on here. So again, I went and I selected them. And then I went and once I had them selected, I didn't have to go and have active records or anything else in there because the reconstruct boundary is actually going through that tool and doing it on its own. It's taking the parcel, going back to the boundary or going back to the record, looking at the record, finding the lines, and then analyzing each of the lines associated with that record. It's moving on to the next record. This is the tool, if you're in the parcel fabric, to go and handle these extra lines. Well, then the next question is, well, what's happening here then? You still have a point. Well, remember, in the parcel fabric, if you have any feature that's got a point on the end of it, let's go back one more time. In the parcel fabric, there's a topology rule that says that all lines have to have points on the ends of them. And it doesn't differentiate between current lines or historic lines. So anytime you have a line in your data set that has an end on it, that end has to have a point on it. So when you find points like this, it might be that that point goes with an active line, but on a separate parcel type. Or it may be that that point goes on the end of a line, but that line might be a historic line. Now, Esri has tried, and they're starting to do retired points and things like that to make it a little bit easier. But the reality is the rule says there's supposed to be a point on the end of every line. So anytime you see a point, there's a line on here. So let's go and turn on the conveyance division, which we did not have on before. Let's do the same thing there. Let's select the conveyance division and then just do reconstruct boundaries and see. Now, when we do this, we can see that those points all disappeared. So they all disappeared because they no longer have lines in our data set that have those points on the ends of them. So you just want to be aware of it, that when you're doing this, you may have to do this against multiple parcel types, not just against one single parcel type, but against multiple parcel types. And because of that, you just want to watch as you're going. Again, this is not something you can batch, but it runs fairly quickly. I would not recommend going and selecting every single parcel in your database and doing them all at once. But, you could do something like select all the ones in a single subdivision. And again, I've got tax parcels on, I've got conveyance division parcels on. I can do this and say, go ahead and take all of these and go ahead and reconstruct those. And on here, Let's go down here now. Those points disappeared. And let's
Mark's
do,
pointed something out in the chat. He says, I noticed an issue. The bottom line changed from 65 feet to 1,700 feet.
yeah. So let's be careful because it might be that I had also selected something else that's in here. Again, I've got other layers on here, including this SimCon. I may also have had some of the PLSS on here, some other line in here that when I selected, I was not paying attention to what was on my selection, but that's what it is. It aggregated something else in here. Again, I haven't paid it much attention on what's in here, but yeah, when I went and did that aggregation, there's conveyance divisions in here and others. It should not, that I'm aware of, ever go and aggregate them all into a single one on here. All right, that's the tool. So that's the first question was how do we consolidate multiple lines without losing data? Do not use merge points. Do not use the, let's make sure I have the right name of that tool. Do not use the merge collinear lines because it's going to take all your selection in there. And you have to select lines in that one. But in the parcel fabric, we do have the tool for reconstruct boundary, in which you select the polygons and it goes through and analyzes what lines are associated with polygons and builds from there. All right. I hope that helped with that first question that we had last time was how do we do that? Next question we have was regarding reversing line directions in here. And I'm going to flip over to this other data set that I had. And let's go in here and let's make sure that these are turned on to labels. And we can have these labeled on here. We can also go and let's make sure that we are seeing the directions in here. So let's go and change this to true for my labeling. All right. By the way, now that I have true in here, it's going to go and turn this on. This is for, in this case, is for all of those lines that are labeled with the COGO values on the right side of the line. One of the things I really love about ArcGIS Pro, especially the labeling now, I can take that expression and I can copy that expression and then I can paste just the expression to these other label classes in here. Sorry. To those other label classes so that because there is a setting on these lines, there's a setting on the lines that tell it not just what type of it, but in fact, it shows you what the label position is, whether it's on the right side of the line or the left side of the line. That's how it determines whether it's inside the polygon or outside the polygon. And by the way, there's a geoprocessing tool to do that. The reconstruct boundaries also tool also does that. So I just want to make sure that we have these directions in here. And I wanted to go through a couple of iterations and show you the right way and the wrong way to do this. So let's and I bet we have both multiples on both of these. All right, so let's go and take these lines and look at these lines. So when we're in here on these lines, all right, we have the old school way of doing it. In order to go and reverse this, all right, what we have to do is only select this one. And then I can go in here and I can edit the vertices. And then once I'm editing the vertices, I can go and change or reverse my direction. Old school arc map. What happens when I do that? I reverse direction. It doesn't change anything. All right. It changes the start and end point of that line. That's all it really did. And if we do this again, the green is the start, excuse me, the red is the start point, the green is the end point on here. And if I go back here, um, here's the red, here's the green. And we do it again. There's the red and the green. It basically reversed the beginning and end point of that line. That's all it did. Had nothing to do with the COGO though. Didn't change the COGO values at all. So we'd have to go and manually make those adjustments on there. That's probably not what you wanted to do. Instead, what we want to do is something like this. Let's get off of edit vertices. We don't want to go and do that. Let's go to the traverse and look at in the traverse. Let's go and say tax lines and we'll do a trace. By the way, this is the way in which you go and trace the traverse in here is you go and tell it what type of lines you're going to go and trace, and then you actually use the trace lines here to go and go through them and rotate around them, and it will go and select those lines, put them into your traverse on here, and allow you to go and use that. All right, so in here, in the traverse tool, we have the ability to go on any one line. We have the ability to go and if I right click there, I can reverse the direction on there. Now, when I'm doing that, it's going to go and reverse it. Well, let's do it. If I reverse the direction, you can see I've reversed that direction instead of being the northeast for my chord bearing. It now is southwest for my chord bearing. Excuse me, southeast, and I'm going to reverse it back to where it was. So the question was, how do we reverse this bearing on here? You can't do it easily within normal type of ArcGIS Pro operations, but in the Traverse tool, you can actually reverse them as you're inputting them. So let's say you actually were inputting it and you input the wrong bearing, or you input the wrong, or you were reading a plat, and that plat or survey, when they drew it in, they gave you the reverse bearing. You can input it, see what it is, and then go and just say, well, let's take this and just reverse that drawing, and it automatically will go and reverse what that is on here. So while you are inputting it, you can go and on the box at the left of it, you can right click and say inverse or reverse this drawing in here. One of the neat little tricks inside the Traverse tool that you can go and do this. That's a really nice function that Esri added here about two versions ago. Really, really nice. Um, I'm looking to see. I don't see any comments on here on that. That
No, I actually have a comment if you have
yeah.
a moment. During the first technique, the label changed from northwest to southeast, and yet you said the Kogo wasn't adjusted at all. Isn't the
Did it?
Kogo and labels, aren't they synonymous with one another?
Yeah. Let's go in here. I didn't notice that. Sorry. Um, let's go in here and let's just select that one line. All right, there's the one line, and this is the northeast line, or excuse me, northwest line. And if we go in here, and again, we have to be under edit vertices, and then we have to go over the line that's selected, and we say reverse direction. Now, when I reverse direction here, it's going, that's what you were saying. So in
Yep,
here,
it just changed.
let's go and see on here. And again, I'm still discovering things about 3.5. It looks like it has changed it now. So these are in fact automatically being calculated as part of that reverse direction on here with this. It's a nice thing. It
That's
used to
pretty
be you
cool.
couldn't do that. It is very cool now that you can do that inside of Pro, even when you're using that old school way of doing things. So if I go in here and just say, let's take this one again, only select that one, and now go and reverse sorry, edit the vertices, then go in here and reverse that. Now, when I reverse it, it does change it to Northwest here, and it changes the label. That actually is a nice improvement on here. I'm still discovering things that they put in 3.5. Even though I was a beta tester on here. I hadn't. They've slipstreamed some things in there, and that's a good job, guys. Good job. All right. Thank you for pointing that out. I didn't notice that when I did that. Any other questions on that? On the reversing the direction of a line and some of the consequences in here. All right.
Nothing in the chat.
Good. Thank you. So that's reversing here. The next one, using azimuths instead of quadrant bearings. This is for our friends over on the island. All right. Over on Maui. So this is normally this is how most of us on the mainland look at this using quadrant bearings and such. However, over in Hawaii, I understand you use azimuths. Um, can you type in the chat window? Do you use north azimuths or south azimuths? South. Okay, so this gives me an opportunity to see this. So what I've done is I've gone in here and said, okay, on here, what I've done is I've changed the way these were on. These are the exact same lines, but on the definitions, instead of saying I was going to go and report a certain thing, I told it a different thing. So there's a couple places to go and do that. Let's look first at the labels on here. So under the label properties, all right, this is the label properties, and this is for Kogo Right. Again, there's, to remind everybody, there's three label classes in the parcel fabric for lines, one for those on the right, one on the left, and one on shared. So let's look at Kogo Right again. And under here, there is a couple of settings. If you go and actually look at, and this is the label expression. And again, I always want to shout out to Jason, who did this initially. Great, great expression. We love it. And inside of here, um, the double quotes, by the way, these left slashes, those are comments. So in here, this is the settings. This is the first segment that you want to look at. And the first thing is, do you want to show the distance? Do you want to show the direction? All right. And then the one you want to look at is the direction type. One is for quadrant bearings, two is for north azimuth, three is for south azimuth. So in this case, and I don't want to do it here, I'm going to do it over here where it's actually on here. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to go and say, well, this is actually not north azimuths. These are south azimuths. And it's just going to check and apply that. And now you will see the labels should actually go and correct themselves because now they're south azimuths instead of north azimuths. So that's the first place. Again, I'm then going to want to go and copy that and paste that expression so it has south azimuths on all of these. Paste the expression in here to those lines so that no matter what the position is, it's still going to express the south azimuth on here. It's the first place you want to go and do that. The next place you want to do that is on the actual definition. Let's make sure I've got that here. Under the direction field, when I went to, I do it fast only because I went to Data Designer to Fields, and it brought this up, and now I can define what type of a direction that is and what type of azimuth I use. In this case, I'm going to change it to a north azimuth. Now, what this does, I'm going to say, go ahead and save the edits that we had. What this does is this is reflective of how it appears in the attribute table on here. All right. And also when we do a single selection, how it appears over there. So that's going to be there. I'm going to save that. And now in the attribute table, when I go and open this up, these values in the direction field will now reflect south azimuths, not north azimuth, not quadrant bearing, but south azimuths. This is one of the amazing things about Pro that was implemented is how flexible it is in being able to go and show us all this information. So this is the second place you have to go and change this and you want to be aware of. All right, is in this field here. All right. And then finally, there's one more thing because it turns out that there's a property that says the display on here. And in this display, it's exactly the same code as over in the label expression, because this way, when I go to the display, it's going to tell me what type it is so that when I go and do a selection on here, it's going to then tell me what that display is over on this line. So there's three places you want to go and set it on here. And the reality is ArcGIS Pro doesn't care what you use. It's storing these lines and storing those directions as a single numeric value. And then, similar to Microsoft Excel, it's then reporting them back to you in whatever format you tell it to do. So, again, great job, Esri, on this. And you'll note when I go and do something like this and say only select this, and then let's go and do that same thing we did previously. And now let's go and right click and reverse this. All right. And watch it reverse, and it reversed to the other. So we'll go ahead and do that also. So it's also set to not duplicate these values, which is why it only shows it one time. So yes, it works. That's the way it's supposed to work. So perfect, perfect. Any other questions or comments on that? That's really you just want to recognize that in fact, um, ArcGIS Pro has the ability to be very flexible in what it gives you back as far as the values. It stores them in one unit and then reports it back certain ways. Matter of fact, if we go back to our project and look at our options, we actually have units in here, and we can look at our angular units, and it will tell us what those angular units are. And if we look at our direction units, we can tell it how to go and the default setting on here, and we can set whether or not this is the default on here for all of these. This is a project setting. This is not a map setting, whereas previously I was in the two maps. But yeah, it's, I guess that's the fourth one you want to look at is what is that set for there? All right, that's that one there. So now let's talk about this concept of building big to small versus small to big. One of the things we mentioned last time was that we have to be aware of something that's unspoken. The unspoken component is that every single bit of information that we're given on on a drawing or a survey drawing, they all contained rounding. Most of the rounding is done to two decimal places for a distance. By the way, it's also usually a ground distance versus a grid distance, but it's rounded to two decimal places. So that if we have a line that's drawn, and it's drawn here, and this line is rounded to two decimal places, that means that this is plus or minus 0.005. All right, it can round up, it can round down to that to that hundredth on here. Well, if we only have one or two, that's fine. That doesn't make much difference. But if we have a whole series of lines, sometimes they'll offset one another, sometimes they won't. So we'll have possibility of a plus 5,000s, plus 5,000, minus 5,000, plus 5,000, plus 5,000. And if we get to a long line, a long enough line, that will make a difference in the overall length of the line that we're inputting. So from an input standpoint, it's better to go and build a big line so that you know if you have that value for that overall line, and then split that line into the smaller pieces, all right, using the divide tool, than it is to build from small and then have them all be the result. That's one of the advantages of building big and then splitting it up into smaller things. The second one, and this comes from a surveying background, is that if I have long lines on here, and Esri's done a good job of trying to replicate and integrate this in here. If I have a series of long lines and I have an adjustment that's going to occur and it's going to move one of these points in here, if I do it on a single long line, it's going to move and realign the entire line. However, if it's a series of small lines, it's going to do the latest line. Now, as we recently, it's yet and introduced this concept of tangential lines, so that when I go and input a series of lines in here, let's go and show you that. If I go in here and do a traverse now, and I just do lines, and I'm going to do here, and I'm just going to say 80 degrees southeast for 50 feet. And I'm going to do the same thing again. If I look right here, I actually have an asterisk there. An asterisk means that, as you're saying, that this is tangent to the previous line. So that as I'm going and doing this, it goes and stores that each of them are then gone and said, okay, well, these are tangent lines. And again, Esri's done a great job of doing this. And now if I go and say, well, I'm supposed to close there, all right, and I can force it to close on here, the entire line, because it's all marked tangent, will move. If I didn't have that in earlier versions of Pro didn't, it would only move that last line instead of treating these as all being tangential. Nice job, Esri, on this, on here. But it also, you want to go and think about an overall concept. It's still smarter to go and not have that rounding error accumulating as you're going through and through and through. All right, so just be aware, there's some built in now on here as far as aggregation for the ability to go and realign things, but it doesn't always take and accommodate all those rounding errors that can aggregate together on here. Better to build from outside to inside on here. Get my opinion. Um, Again, just as a surveyor, this is sort of the way we think. It's like, how can I go and minimize any errors? How can I identify these? By the way, in school, in college, we spend an entire semester on error propagation and mitigation. How do you go and find an error? What type of errors can there be? There can be systematic errors. There can be what's called blunders, which are just introduced by operators and things of that sort. There's a lot of analysis going on as far as where these errors can be introduced and such. And one of them is rounding. And there's rounding not just on the distances, but there's rounding on the directions or bearings. The bearings are in fact rounded to the closest half of a second. May not seem like much, but it can go and become accumulated as you go on there. It's the other reason why, if you remember last time we were talking about what values do you input when you're inputting a curve, that's the reason why with a long curve, it's better to go and use the the arc length, the arc length or the chord distance than the delta angle or the central angle. With a short curve, it's better to go and use the delta angle. So again, it's because of this whole theory of error propagation and what has the biggest impact on it. How do you go and approximate that? Comments or questions on here? No? Good. All right. Next thing, looking at techniques on ground to grid. This is one, and thank you again for sending that in. This is one that I always find fascinating. Let's go out here and let's do a traverse here. Let's go and create a record just to go and do it here. All right. And we know what that bearing is. All right. And let's do something. Let's assume that this is really far off. And we go and we get a legal description. That legal description says start at this point, but then it says go along this south line on a bearing of, let's call it 75 degrees southeast. All right. Now we know that's 82 degrees. And We can go 300 feet. All right. And we can see that there's a big difference in here. And let's just go 90 feet for 100 feet. Let's go 90 degrees for 300 feet. And then we'll go 90 degrees deflection angle for 100 feet and close down. So we're closed down here. The traditional type of workflow is you go and you take these lines, you then go and create seeds, which when they created a seed, I'm assuming, yet, and then we can go and build this. All right, there's the build. And then you go and do an align parcels. Well, here's the problem. Align parcels works really well, but it only goes and works within this tolerance that you're building. Now, for me to get a tolerance where this comes to within a certain limit here, um, it's going to be a little tough to do. All right, it's going to be really aggregating this. Maybe this is 60 feet or something. Even then, that's not going to be enough in here because this first this first tolerance is points to points. There's no point here. There's no point here. So really, it's the second tolerance, which is point to edge, or what we used to call in ArcMap parcel fabric line points. How do I get that point to here? Well, I actually have to go even further in here and say, well, let's go and make this almost 80 feet. Well, that's a little ridiculous on here because it still isn't doing it. So let's go out of here. Let's get off of this. Off of this. We don't want to do that. Matter of fact, I'm going to go back and I'm going to go and revise this. I'm going to undo the build. I'm going to undo the seed on here. I do have my lines. Let's look at our lines and make sure that we're all in agreement. These lines, they have the record direction on them. But the thing is, I need to make sure that they automatically rotate correctly. So in here, there is this ground to grid correction in which I can tell it enter the ground to grid. And I'm going to tell it that the line that I'm inputting, and again, this is because these are all part of the record, it's going to go and automatically do this. The line that I'm inputting is supposed to be 75 degrees southeast. And as soon as I put in a valid bearing here, it then says, okay, tell us what that bearing is in your data. And now when I click here, it will go and apply that on here. And it didn't do that. Why did you not do that? 16 degrees. Oh, I'm still finding things that are different. Normally, oh, because I'm not in the traverse. That's what it is. Sorry. Not in the traverse. Sorry. Let's go and delete all these lines. Now let's do it. Now that I have a ground to grid in here, let's go back to the traverse. Sorry. That automatic correction only happens if you're in the traverse because then they're still active in the traverse. So this is 75 degrees southeast, and we said it's 300, and then we went 90, and then 100, and 90, and then 300, 90 degrees, and then 100. Notice the difference on here. When I built it that way with a ground to grid, not only, again, within the traverse, while I had my traverse active, once I get out of it, they're no longer associated with it. But let's go and look at the differences here. Now, when I select my lines in here and go in here, each of these lines then now have and are stored with them the automatic rotation over here. Now, the storing of the rotation for most cadastral mappers, it's not going to make a whole lot of difference whether it's stored or not stored. However, If in fact you're ever going to use or ever going to perform any sort of a least squares adjustment, that value is actually integrated into the least squares adjustment. So it understands that there was a rotation on that line, and it's not going to try to move those points down to where this other rotation is. So it is important that this be set with ground to grid correction if you've got any differences between what your source information say and what you've got on your actual data set. I personally recommend that every time you do a traverse in a parcel fabric, you go and develop and you assign a ground to grid correction for the bearing so that it automatically does the rotations for you and stores what those rotations are. And you'll find that this is a much easier now way of doing this than the way we were doing it before. Because now I can get off of the traverse, get out of traverse, create the seed, go to my build, then go to my line parcels, and I don't have to have here. I can go 10 feet here. I can go 10 feet here. I can tell it to go and generate, and it automatically will generate on here because it's already building this closer to what it is. All right, it's already going and making it close. It's applying the rotation for me as I'm doing it. It's proactively applying those rotations instead of trying to do it reactively and try to get everything to fit. And once I've gone and I've created the seed and then gone and built it, I then have to deal with not just the parcels, but I also have to deal with the lines and the points and make sure everything is selected. And when I go in here, when I do the rotation, do I have topology set or not set? I don't have to deal with that if I set my ground to grid as I'm going and doing it. Much cleaner way of doing these things. It's again, I have to tell you, I'm all about efficiency. Again, others would say I'm just really lazy. I don't want to do extra things, and I don't want to go and introduce places where there can be errors. So I'm telling you, yes, it might seem a little foreign in the beginning, but every time you do a rotation, excuse me, every time you input a value into the traverse in the parcel fabric, please go ahead and put ground to grid on there. It will help you immensely on there. Any questions or comments? I don't see any in here yet.
Not at
All
the
right.
moment.
All right. One more thing. What are the differences between aligned features and aligned parcels? Well, one of which you just, you know, as we get in here, let's go and do something else here on here in which we draw something. And it doesn't have to be a full-blown parcel, but let's do it. I already have an existing record. Let's go ahead and create a parcel on here. And we'll just create a tax parcel. And this time I'm going to create um, a parcel. All right, there's my parcel. And let's go ahead and build that parcel. Remember the build in a parcel fabric, what it's going to go and look at the topology rules that lines have to have points on them. The polygon has to have lines on it, and the lines have to be on the boundary of polygons. So it's going to go and find anything that's missing and build it for me. So let's go ahead and build this. So now I have lines and I have all the lines I need. I have all the polygons in here. I have built, um, a fully built parcel here. So if I go in here and try to do an aligned parcel now, and this is a fairly simple parcel, but I want to go and align it so it fits to the adjoining ones here. Now, granted, there's a big exaggeration. First thing I have to recognize is that the tolerance has to include any adjoining points that I might want to go and build to. So let's go and set this to 50. Okay, 50, we can get to here to here. This probably goes here. This probably goes here. And this probably should go here is where it should go. Um, I can tell it, let's go and do that. What does that look? In this case, it hasn't really set this. It should go here. Um, This should go here, but because it's moving down here, it's about right in here. So one of the issues that we have is that we have to be careful with what's actually going to be built in here. Um, the align parcels is a really good tool if you've got very similar geography or geometry, very similar geometry. It's very easy. But if you have very different geometry, it's a little bit tougher to do on here. So I could actually tell it, go ahead and do this. I can go in here and I can interactively delete maybe that one there. I can go to actually create a link and say this goes here on here and generate it again. Oh, that's still not going to be right. Let's go and generate a link here now that says this. Let's interactively delete that one. That's going to become a line point in here. Let's go and create a new link that says this goes here. Generate it again, see what it looks here. Still looks weird. And again, so a line feature is really nice if you have something that's very similar. There's not a lot of changes that you have to make. However, you have to recognize that the align parcels tool is actually nothing more than a, let's go and turn this off. The align parcels tool is a combination of two existing ArcGIS Pro tools, two adjustment tools. The first one is the transform tool. The transform tool, let's go and make sure I turn on at least map topology here. The transform tool, what it is, you tell it this point goes here, this point goes here, this point goes here. Right? You tell it where the points go. And if you have, once you have at least, make sure, yeah, once you have at least 3 links in there, you can do a transformation. You can do an affine transformation, and there's similarity transformations, both 2 and 3D. There's rubber sheeting, linear rubber sheeting, and nearest neighbor rubber sheeting. The affine is the most mathematically rigorous. It's the one that's going to try to fit it as much as it can. And I can tell it to go and do this. And you can see it kind of works, but it doesn't really necessarily work all the way. But that's the transform tool. And if we look at the build parcel here, this part here, this part here, where it goes from here to here, this is actually transform. Links, adding anchor points, interactively deleting and creating, those are part of that transform tool. And then this part here is actually align features tool. So the align parcels tool is actually a combination of a couple different tools in here. Works great if it's similar. If it's not similar, it becomes a little bit more difficult to go and interact with. So I actually was teaching something today, and it's like, well, there's tools in here. There's really a couple neat things in here that you might use instead of aligned parcels if you get into problematic problems. And I'm going to show you some of the things we discovered is that there's 2 tools that we use. If we have existing points, what we can do is we can use that merge points, those merge parcel points, and I can select those 2 points and I can say merge those 2 points together. And it will go and merge those. And I can say merge these 2 points together and we'll go and merge those together. All right. So we'll go and merge those and snap those points together. But that doesn't solve where I have no points and I just want to go and align them to those other features. In that case, what I want to do is I want to do an align feature. Now, when I do that align feature, I want to go and draw a path. And this is pretty big. I did quite an exaggeration here. But if I say I want that point to move over here, let's make it a little bit bigger here so we can see it. What will happen is that it will go and take and align not just the points, but any vertex inside of here so that it matches the path that I have. Now, one of the interesting components of the Align Features tool is that it actually will go and take the lines and move the lines over. It will take this line and move it over here. It will take that point, take that polygon and move it over. And then if I have a point, that point will actually be moved perpendicular to my path. Now, in this case, this is very close to it, but it will be moved perpendicular to the path on there. All right, so I do want to be careful with this when I do this, but I'm just going to go and say, okay, let's go ahead and merge this on here and let it go and merge over because it went and merged that over. The thing I have to be aware of is it moved the points, but there's a real possibility that if this was not perpendicular, it moved the point so it was not on that corner anymore. So I usually recommend going back and saying, just build our record again, just to make sure that it's there. Merge points between records steals the point from one record, though. Yes or no? Well, what the merge points does is it actually doesn't steal it from the record, but it goes and dissolves them into a single point on here. It literally replaces any points that are selected and connects everything up to that one point that you decide you want to go and connect it to. So if I were to go and turn back here and go back here. All right, so on here, and I do merge points again, and I go here, and I select these 2 points in here. What it will do is I have these combinations on here. It will take and delete this point, delete that point. It will then go and take this line and move it to this point, take this line, move it to here, take this polygon and redefine it. That's the corner there that it's going to go to. It doesn't, it doesn't really steal it. It just deletes it. All right. So because you don't want to have points on top of points, you want to have the smallest number of points in here. And parcels and records can share points. The rules that are assigned for the parcel fabric is that every every feature, including points, should have a record associated with it, which means that a feature cannot have multiple records on it, but they all have to have at least one. So those are the rules. But yeah, so it goes and moves them together. And I now have, if I look here and I do a select here and look and see what I have, I only have 1 point. And that point still has stored on it whatever record was originally used when I created it. If I created it using an active record, yeah, I did. It still has that record, but it just goes and makes sure that everything is in there on there. Good point, though. Thank you. Yeah. So the differences between align parcels are a really good tool if the geometries are similar. Again, something like this in here, there wasn't big differences in there. But if you have very, very different geometries where maybe they're trying to completely replace something or maybe it's along some sort of natural boundary, it becomes more difficult, more challenging to use the align parcels tool. And often we'll just go and step back and say, okay, we know how this thing works. Let's either go and redefine these parcels, or we'll go in here and we'll use merge points, and then we'll use align features to go and correct the way these things are supposed to be aligned. All right. I was hoping we would cover everything, and we did cover everything. Let's ask, are there any questions on here? Any other comments? We've gone over the hour, and I'm sorry about that. Any other questions on here? If not, thank you all for joining, and I'm glad you did. I'm going to go and stop the recording, and please join up for a newsletter, and please go and join us in future workshops. Thanks.